And good evening. I am Zach Hughes, and I am your host. Topics. See this. There we go. Good evening. I'm your host, Zach Hughes. This is Hot Topics. Sorry about the delay, folks, and tried to get that show on about a little bit ago, and we had to postpone it briefly. Um, just the joy of um, navig- navigating around some things. All right, let's get going. Tonight is Super Bowl Sunday. The kickoff is about 6:30 Eastern, which is a short time away. It's going to be the Seattle Seahawks against the New England Patriots, playing out in Santa Clara, California, which is a lot warmer than it is here. It is a cold Sunday out there. Um, wow. I actually thought it was colder today, felt colder out there today than it did yesterday. I often joke about it. I say my hands are the indicators of how cold it is because they hurt if it gets too cold. All right, let's jump right in. So, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about Vermont's decision to seek a federal waiver around getting rid of junk food and soda, what I understand, um, from the SNAP program. Um, and so we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about a few other things as we jump in at this abbreviated time due to the Super Bowl. So, my first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put the Hot Topics link in here. Let's see if I can do it. Hold on. Yeah, this is always fun, isn't it? Yeah, there we go. I should be able to do it. Right there. There it is. So that link is the Hot Topics Facebook page, and a word about that. So between shows, I often put up updates and other fun things. In fact, I put something up there today. Where were you in 19, or what were you doing in 1998? Something like that. Anyway, also shows will be going up there, but they're going to be via YouTube because Facebook has a 30-day storage policy on videos. All right, so that is your link. Go over there. If you haven't done so already, give me a like or a follow, whichever is available there. And so, all right, let's jump right into this because I got to tell you, I had quite a debating mood yesterday. I was telling my friends, that I, you know, was quite debative yesterday about a few things. And one of them was that Vermont is seeking, it's going to become one of those states that is going to exempt, prohibit the purchase of junk food and or I think soda as well, although um, it's not clear what the junk food definition is yet. But I want to talk about SNAP because what I saw last night was still very frustrating, which is why I commented like 3 times and then slowed down. Um, you know, so what is SNAP? So let's talk about what SNAP is. It's basically government funded government funded ability to for folks who are low income to purchase food. And they get a certain amount each month, depending on their income and so on. Um, and this is, you know, what is really interesting about this. So SNAP used to be, well, not used to be, but Vermont calls SNAP 3 squares. Um, it also used to be called food stamps before that. 3 squares was a attempt by Vermont to get a less stigmatized approach, as was the use of the EBT card, which was introduced, I think about a couple decades ago, over a couple decades ago. Um, but I want to talk about the stigma that goes with that. There's just so much judgment and stigma. The comments were just amazing last night. I was absolutely shocked. And not really shocked because these days there's just a lot of judgment out there between any low income program and anything to have to do with low income. There's always this stigma of you need to go get a job. I don't like having to pay for, your free lounging, and it's not free. No, it may seem free, but it's not free at all. A lot of people are low income struggling. Even those there are people. So some facts about Three Squares that I think people need to continue to be aware of. One is that a lot of people who are on Three Squares, there are some people who have jobs. So, in fact, that's another thing I'm going to talk about in a couple minutes for you folks who are like, oh, they need a job. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. There are people on it who have jobs, and it gives back to the economy. So each time that someone uses that EBT card for food or whatever, they get back to that economy. The businesses benefit, and it trickles in. Now you're still going to tell me, well, though I don't want my taxpayer money spent on. I don't want my taxes going toward that. Well, let me tell you something about that. That program is also there for you. And you're going to say to me, well, no, it'll never happen. Don't tell me it'll never happen. Because that's like asking for it. You never know. You might lose your job. You might have a situation that requires it. Even if you have your job, say they, have to make some changes, or you have a situation. That program is there for you. And that's how I've approached it. I was a recipient of Three Squares. And when I didn't need it anymore, I went off it. But I know that if I need it, it's there. And so it gets to me when the state of Vermont has kind of looked at this idea of, or is going to implement by requesting this waiver, which is the first step in prohibiting certain items from being purchased. Now, on the face, that looks good, right? After all, we want people to have healthier food, make healthier choices. But who are we to make that determination, in a sense? And yes, SNAP already restricts certain purchases, including, from what I understand, hot food and obviously alcohol and stuff like that. There are certain prohibited items already. So here's what this is going to do. This is going to make stigma a lot worse, in my opinion. Yes, it does look like if you're going to exempt junk food, which again, that hasn't been defined. And who's going to define that? I sure hope that someone's going to define that that knows what they're doing. Because, like, several points were made on those comments last night. One was, what exactly is the definition of junk food? I mean, we think we know what it is until we get into the nick of it. Say they prohibit ginger ale. Well, I'd have a problem with that because ginger ale helps when people are sick. Okay? But if you suddenly say, well, no soda, well, that's going to be definitely a problem. So we have to look at these things. We know, like I know a few years ago, lawmakers talked about this idea of, prohibiting junk food. And here's my response to that. I would support it only if, and you're going to say whatever, dude, but only if the lawmakers and state officials are prohibited from using their pay to purchase junk food. Why? Because that's taxpayer money, right? We're paying taxpayer money to those folks. So, you want to go down this road, let's go down it. That's the way I see it. This isn't, and you're going to, and I know I have people tell me all about how people need to get jobs. And that's next, by the way. I'm going to talk to you about this next. Because for all those who are bitching and moaning, excuse my language, about people needing jobs, let's talk about that next. So what's going to happen next is, because of this big, beautiful bill in Washington, people are going to have to get, they're going to have to meet some requirements for jobs. And then, by the way, Vermont already had a form of this in place. They had a form of this in place. They had a system whereby that you had to work, and even if it was a volunteer job. And how do I know that? I supervised somebody who had to do that. So before people tell me it's not possible, it's very possible. I talked to my cousin, and he told me he loves the idea of people having to get jobs. I agree. That's why that's there. But I also we have to acknowledge there are certain people who cannot work. And that's the way it is. That's why we have these programs. And it is very necessary to go there. And just to give you an idea of what we're looking at, I'll get the link to you after the show, because but we're looking at some changes, and people have been informed as of today, are being informed as of this weekend. They may be getting messages from, Economic Services about some changes coming up in March. And those are that, there's two different possible requirements with one exemption area. The work requirements are time-limited work, which is, basically you would be required to work for like a volunteer-based organization, a volunteer position, or you would have to have an actual job, or as they wrote in there, which I didn't really like, a real job. And I'm telling you right now, this gets really frustrating for me, because that definition kind of caught me off guard. A real job. Again, that's an interesting thing. So this is for folks who are on Three Squares, and what they need to be aware of is this is coming up. And you just need to be proactive with your folks, with your support people, whether it's your doctor or whoever it is. You can also reach out to me here on the show, because I run a couple volunteer organizations that can sign off on these things for volunteer work. So just to keep that in mind, the one thing you don't want to do is ignore this. I think Hunger Free Vermont is being very clear that these messages from Economic are not a scam. So if you get this is not a scam. So be aware of that. And again, to you people who are saying they need to get jobs, well, guess what? Some of them are going to get jobs, but the question is, are they going to be able to keep them? And this is really what this is about. And so you got two unfair scenarios converging in Vermont right now. Very interesting. And lots of you are going to tell me, you know what, but junk food. And I've had, people tell me, again, though, junk food has not been defined yet. I just want to look at the comments here and just say, let's see. So I've got, hey, Caitlin, try to get you. Yeah, and see, this is really what's interesting. And so, Caitlin, you're also pointing out that the soda Sprite helps your stomach. And I think this is really important. I I don't know who I could get a hold of, but maybe, I'm sure word's getting out there. But the whole point is, like, you hear this, so Sprite and like ginger ale help people. One person told me last night that ginger ale keeps them from going up to the emergency room. I think it just needs to be looked at. Again, it looks good on paper. And I'll tell you, as a policymaker, policy person, I have made some policy mistakes because it looked good on paper. I mean, who doesn't want junk food excluded if you look at it on paper? You say, well, it's for healthy reasons because people are using it. But do we really know what people are doing? Let's look at some of these comments right now. A lot of frustration here. And so you have a point of, and just wanting people to be aware. So there's like two different things going on with food with three squares, and you just need to be aware of it. Again, we don't know the definition of junk food, so we'll have to keep an eye on that. People who are possibly getting notified as early as this weekend around work requirements need to just maintain their vigilance with their supports, whether it's to go to a doctor or to keep economic in the loop about it. And I mean, it's also possible that you may decide to ditch three squares. I'm aware of that. I know people who will probably say, screw that. I'm hoping that they don't. But as far as the work requirements, I think, we can blame Washington for that increase in it. And I know you folks are going to tell me, but that's a good thing. It's a good thing until somebody can't do it. Okay, and then how's that going to work? Who's going to pick up the slack then? I'm going to tell you that the ground level folks like myself have to pick up that slack. And that's not good. The reality is some people just are not able to work. But the good news is I forgot to talk about the exempt status. So, the exempt status also covers if you're found disabled, and there's a few other things in there. There is an exemption area, which is great. So it's not a 100% you're screwed, because it's possible you may not be screwed. But I just want you to be aware that as you get told all this, and after the show I have to put an email notification out. I wasn't even watching for this because you hear about it and you think, oh, it's okay, but it's really not okay. And I think we need to look at this as a how it goes. Annie, how are you? Let's see, I'm wondering what they mean. See, Annie, we don't know what they mean by junk food yet because nobody has defined that. This is a very good question, and we're waiting for that. As I said, maybe before you got on, we're concerned about, like people who, rely on Sprite and ginger ale while they're sick. Hello, Elizabeth. How you doing? Oh, good turnout today, guys. I love this. Let's see. I think it's really frustrating. And it feels like people are getting. I had a friend of mine who feels like they are getting squeezed very hard. But I think I want to really emphasize the importance of this program. And one of the items I had commented about, because I had testified about this program maybe a year and a half ago, and the state was looking at the idea of, through lawmakers, we're looking at the idea of allowing you to use your EBT card at participating restaurants. And I have a feeling, since they've sought this waiver, I don't think this is going to get through. I don't think this got anywhere anyway, but I'll have to check, make sure that I'm right. I don't think it got anywhere. But under this bill, you would have been able to go out to eat at a restaurant. This was targeted this was the idea of lessening the stigma, and it's not the idea of, well, I'm going to go out and get a lobster or whatever it was. It was, and it's a great idea, but it also would require the restaurants to be participating. Exactly, I agree with you, Eddie, and I really am actually concerned about it. I'm so concerned, I'm actually going to ask some questions about this. I don't know if we get anywhere, but I do definitely have these questions. I think people who are putting comments in, VT Public or Vermont Public need to also be asking their policymakers, because it sounds like it's state level. It doesn't sound like this is legislative. This is basically, you need to get a hold of somebody in the Scott administration and say what's going on here, and what does this include, and who's going to decide. So just bear in mind, you need to actually reach out to somebody in the Scott administration. This is not a legislative thing. This is somebody in the Scott administration is initiating the waiver with the federal government. Vermont has joined a list of states, which is very disappointing. I was really hoping Vermont would stay away from this. I think it's going to create a more stigmatizing situation. I have a concern about that. But the bigger concern I have right now is the work requirements, if people are determined to be able to work. But I believe folks who are disabled there's some exemptions in play. And it may seem like I'm repeating myself, but some of the themes I put out there again last night is about fairness. If they're going to require us to, take that hit as far as junk food, I want them, lawmakers and policymakers to take that hit. I don't want their pay to be used for junk food. So where does that end for us? And people say, well, that's a program, though. There's a difference. They have a paycheck. No, it's taxpayer money. It adds it adds an issue, a socialization issue, a social issue in my view. And I'm tired of it. I want people to experience, people who are judgmental in comments, to experience a month on food, on without their income, and they can still kind of make those comments to me. I want you to understand that this isn't, and I've conceded in my comments on the Facebook post last night that I'm in the minority about this view, but, I gotta tell you, this is very much frustrating, and I think it does look good on the face. If you look at policy, you say, well, it looks good on the face. The fact that, like, in my view, when I had to make a policy decision years ago, I said, oh, it looks good on the face that we wanted to shift newspapers to internet only. Well, that looked good until we shifted the newspapers to online subscription with a scanning ability. You had a scanning box. You could, you'd scan it into your phone or your device. That looked really good. It sounded cool. It would save the organization money. We would, it was all about that. And the next thing you know, well, we had, and I believe there was we were still delivering. Yeah, that's what was going to happen. What was going to happen is we were going to go online. It wasn't all shifted online because we had the ability to send the newspapers out and distribute them still. We were going to do that. But then what happened is actually when we implemented this, we got a lot of protests, of course. I still remember trying to put out there, the change. I had a picture of me holding up the newspaper, and I was so excited, but I was kind of conveying positivity, and everybody was saying, "What the hell are you doing, Hughes?" And then they literally were saying, "This isn't good. This isn't good. You're not gonna be able to. Not everybody's gonna be able to read it," and that's true. But then the next thing that was true is this. So distributing those papers, I still had, because I took part in that what I call free distribution. The problem is I couldn't distribute all those papers. We weren't able to distribute them correctly. So guess what? We went back to the old system. So again, this policy shift um, is good on paper. This junk food thing, because what you hear Vermont officials saying is we want people to have healthier food. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. But I, that's not, provide cheaper, healthier food. Maybe that would be the smart move to do. I have health conditions, and I got to make sure we're still going. I think we are. I'm sorry. Sometimes this thing freezes on me, so I have to make sure it's still going. But I have medical conditions, and I'm frustrated that I have to, go cheaper. And I think it's really frustrating for people. And and I hope that y'all reach out to the Scott administration. I know some of you don't like the Scott administration, but that's who we have right now. And don't tell me, well, I can't do it because they're not going to listen anyway. Well, I think they would listen to you if you said, ginger ale helps me. Sprite helps me when I'm ill. Please reach out to the Scott administration. I certainly will try to find that and get that out to y'all on here and other venues, other ways. Look out for it on the Hot Topics page. I'll look for a contact for that because I think that's important. Yeah, make your calls, but bear in mind that lawmakers aren't making this decision. This is in the Scott administration. Okay, this isn't a lawmaker call. You're going to have to call someone in the Scott administration and say no. Or say, um, or ask what that definition is. Do what you're doing here. Do what you're doing on this other page, but don't just leave it on these pages because it doesn't mean anything. No one is going to really pay attention to those comments on pages. You may think, well, Governor Scott reads them himself. Maybe, but probably not. So I'm going to be one of the people to actually reach out and say, what do you mean by no junk food? What does that mean? And from what I've read, as I said, it's not been determined yet. So you still have time to make those calls and say, hey, like Annie, like you just said, we were brought up on that ginger ale thing. How many of you stayed home from school drinking ginger ale? Or for you folks in my generation, you stayed home from school and watched, Price is Right while you're drinking ginger ale and eating crackers. But let's be realistic about this whole thing because, in the end of the day, this is a social issue, and and I think people who are judgmental, please bear in mind that this program is here for you. And you may say, I'll never need the program, but guess what? There's so many reasons you might need the program. One comment that disturbed me last night, and I think we need to stay away from these areas, is somebody was saying, well, I think that folks should be mandated to take nutrition courses and mandated to do this and that. Really? You want to mandate people? How would you like to be mandated? That's not how this works. Just because the taxpayers are paying for, you know, three squares doesn't mean they should be mandating things that are out of reason. Uh, Maybe, asking people, are they interested in learning about things? That's probably a better plan. Mandating is such a worse way of doing it. And some of you ask, who am I? I'm one who has been through that system, who has been through that, and knows that this program is vital, and has worked with Hunger Free Vermont through testimony and trying to get that word out. So I'm hopeful that we don't have. I'm hopeful y'all can make those calls. And next week, I'm going to say the same thing to you. If you haven't done it already, you need to make those calls. People who are actually concerned, that is. People who are judgmental, well, I urge you to educate yourselves. You probably don't need to make those calls because you're not willing to concede that this is a good idea. Because it's your taxpayer money and you don't like it. That's where your taxes go. And you hate it. I know how much you hate it in your own fake mind. But the reality is that it's there for you. So remember that. Every service that you criticize is there for you. All right, enough of that jazz, huh? Let's see. Where are we at in the comments? Oh my God. Right? Yeah, I agree with you, double letter and cupcakes. Just saying here. Yeah, and I just gotta say, this is just great because I can do this. And as we actually, speaking of junk food, I can have a little fun now, I guess, because I'm going to tone it down now. But please make those calls. And you know who to call, but I'll try to get the direct contact down to you. It's Super Bowl Sunday. People are going to spend lots of money on junk food tonight. I'm not much of a junk food on this. I'm eating goldfish and saltines tonight. Hopefully that's not junk food. But we're on Super Bowl Sunday. And I urge folks to be safe tonight as well. I would urge you to use whatever safe means if you need to get a ride home, whatever. Don't drive if you're intoxicated, anything like that. Even one drink is too much. I know people, well, I just had one drink. Okay, and well, Annie, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, I'm hearing a lot about flu cases. Yeah, Annie, I had that snarkiness yesterday, but yeah, I had a little delay in my meds, so I joked about it. I said, well, I love being like this because it's you get more open and you're more open and argument oriented. But I'm sorry to hear you're with the flu. That can be nasty. I've heard a couple of nasty flu cases going on. I try to avoid the flu the best I can. Yeah. Yeah, I had a stomach thing the other day. My God, it wasn't good. Oh man. Yeah, man. I want to tell one more story, and then we're going to wrap it up for today. But yeah, thank you, Annie, for coming over today and feeling snarky. I like that. I truly like snarkiness. Okay, so actually 4 years ago tonight, not tonight, but Super Bowl Sunday, I was wrapping up the Super Bowl and watching it as it was wrapping up. And very cold Sunday, oh my goodness. And like today, and I got a call from one of our outreach folks, and they told me about a gentleman who had found his way into Montpelier. Just came off the bus, and could I come over to the shelter in the morning to meet with him into the overflow here in Montpelier? And I said, yeah, absolutely, wouldn't mind. Yeah, I had a couple of concerns. I heard he came from California, so I was kind of concerned that was he exposed to COVID at the time? Because yeah, that's what I remembered thinking. But I remember how cold it was. I said, shit, it's going to be cold. So because the overflow closed early, the next morning, that means I had to get up early and do that. And I went over, met with him, very nice guy, and originally I thought he was just looking to move here. It took me 3 days to learn that he had actually decided to take a road trip. And his wife, said whatever, to him, and said, yeah, and he was, oh my God, he was such a sweet gentleman. But I feel like he would have fallen through the cracks if I didn't stick with him. So for the next 2 weeks, I literally stuck with him through the support of different organizations, including Good Samaritan and Another Way. Another Way, and I think another organization, we put him into, we put him into a couple hotel rooms, and then eventually got him over to the shelter in Barrie. But I stuck with him for 2 weeks, like glue. And I made sure that he was safe, because he really wasn't safe. And it was cold. I remember being super cold. And by the way, I was volunteering to do this. This was not part of my job. And I was lucky that my paid job didn't have any obligations going on at that time. So I ended up sticking with him. So what was I like? Just making sure he was okay and making sure he was connecting with the right people, and dealing with some of the stresses of up and downs, like, and connecting with his wife and trying to make plans to get him back home. The most frustrating part of that whole thing was when the state was reluctant, expressed some skepticism about sending him back home, paying to send him back home, because he likes to wander, which is true. He had a history of wandering. But I quickly pointed out that, we're going to pay for it regardless. So you can either send him home, back to Cali, or California, which he came from Emeryville. He was from Emeryville, California. And that's an irony, because I took a train out to Emeryville. But he was, anyway, they expressed him, I was saying that if we didn't send him back, we're going to pay for it anyway. Vermont's going to pay for it. So I eventually got that squared away and made sure that he, and I secured some funding so that I could get reimbursed for taking him down to Boston and putting him on a plane. And what do I mean by actually putting him on a plane? I requested permission from the airline to go past the security gate. I made sure he got on that plane, and I made sure that he had the proper airline support that he needed. And he did get home the next morning, and I just remember being so grateful that he did that. And I had told him before he left, said, I'll call him Tom. I said, Tom, do me a big favor, and that's the real name, but Tom, do me a favor and bring your wife next time. Just to give you an idea of what Tom went through as far as before he came to Vermont, I was absolutely shocked. He traveled from California by train, ended up in Chicago. Somehow he survived 3 weeks in Chicago at a traveler's lodge. I have no idea how he did that. Kind of scary. Um, and then he made his way into Vermont. It was very cold. I mean, that's what was really concerning to me. And I think he would have died. I later quoted this, and there's a couple moving moments for me. And the quote was, I felt obligated to get him home. And that was really what it was, that I felt obligated to do it. The other agencies here, you can be an agency staff and just do your job, or you can feel obligated. You know, and I just had this feeling of being obligated. But I wasn't the only one who was part of this. We had a nice little network who really worked on this. And, you know, it just tells you that outreach doesn't take Super Bowl Sunday off. And, you know, Tom is safe today because we worked together to keep him, you know, safe so that his wife, his family could have him back. And, you know, I was just so grateful about that, to be able to do that. And God knows what would have happened if Tom had been left adrift. Um, you know, and hopefully, you know, that kind of is a positive moment for you folks here on this cold Super Bowl Sunday. Um, and yeah, so that's where we're at. You know, folks, I think I'm going to wrap it up. This has been fun. I appreciate y'all coming out today. I do apologize about the delay of getting the show on, and I think if y'all saw my first attempt to get the show on a couple hours ago, you know, don't mind that. But this is the, you know, I was able to get it on. If I wasn't able to do it at 5 o'clock, I wasn't going to do it at all today. I wish everyone a very safe Super Bowl Sunday, and I urge you to look for the favorite game of mine that I'm going to put up around Super Bowl. You know, my favorite Super Bowl game that I pull up every year on Hot Topics, and you'll see that, and I urge you to take part in that. And I'm going to try to get that contact information out to who you need to talk to in the Scott administration about the junk food thing. And then I also would like folks who are on SNAP to pay particular attention and utilize their resources, including advocates, around the work requirement increase scenario. Okay, folks, thank you. It's been a pleasure here, and may everyone be safe today as we go through this very cold snap, which should be ending some point tomorrow. But please be safe. And from here in Montpelier on a very cold Sunday, I'm Zach Hughes, and guess what? I'm out of here.